ahead and use a pry tool to go ahead and get behind the wheel and the hubcap. Remove the cap and set it aside. Using a 21mm socket, go ahead and remove the lug nuts. And go ahead and remove the wheel. Our wheel is rusted to our hub a little bit, just working that off. Go ahead and remove the wheel and set that aside. Want to go ahead and remove this nut from the outer tie rod end, holding it to the steering knuckle. Now there's a cotter pin here. Ours is excessively rusted, so we're going to do our best. We'll go ahead and use a small punch just to try and get that cotter pin down. Now we had a hard time attempting to get our cotter pin out. We could not get it out, it was too corroded. So we were able to put an 18mm socket over the nut. We're going to go ahead and use our impact gun and a swivel to go ahead and remove that nut. Now we're going to go ahead and use a 24mm wrench on the nut here. I'm going to go ahead and loosen this here. Once we get that nut off, we'll go ahead and use a punch and punch out the rest of the cotter pin out of the ball joint. Then we'll go ahead and use a hammer, and we're going to strike the knuckle right here to release the outer tie rod end. Make sure you're wearing safety glasses. Good. Drop the tie rod end out. What we want to do is we want to unthread the outer tie rod end. You want to count how many full rotations it takes to take this off so we can put it back on to get a preliminary alignment setting. Let's go ahead and start taking this off. Roughly 17, using a pair of pliers. Go ahead and remove your clamp. I'm going to go ahead and spin off the lock nut here. Once that's off, go ahead and remove your clamp. Now on the inside part of the boot, there is a band right here holding this in place. I'm going to use a punch. This is not a reusable component. Remove the band. I'm going to go ahead and pull the boot off. I'm just going to try and wire brush around here, clean off any of the rust off of there that's keeping that from sliding off. I'm just going to use a pick to get up underneath the lip right here. Just run around the band. Good, slide your boot off. And right here on the back side of the inner tie rod, there is a lock washer. Just going to use our pry tool here. We just want to lift up that tab a little bit. Using a large pair of pliers, I'm going to go ahead and loosen this inner tie rod end. Go ahead and spin that off. We're going to install our lock washer, and then we'll go ahead and thread the tie rod end into the rack. Using your pliers, go ahead and snug this down. I'm going to use a small hammer and I'm going to roll over the edges. On the washer to lock that into place. Now before we're installing our boot, I like to put excess grease on the inside here. I'll go ahead and work the inner tie rod around, getting that grease packed in there good. Go ahead and install your boot. Now to help that boot line up a little bit easier for you, you can go ahead and turn the other wheel, and it'll bring that rack in. So let's go ahead and do that. Line up that boot and pop that back onto the rack. Use a pair of pliers, go ahead and pop that inner clamp on. Next, go ahead and get your lock nut threaded on. And you can go ahead and grab your outer tie rod. You want to go ahead and spin that on. It took 17 turns. All right, once you get to that, go ahead and bring that nut down. We'll bring this down and get our knuckle lined up. Good, line your ball joint up there. We'll go ahead and thread our castle nut on. We'll go ahead and get that snug down. Now we'll go ahead and torque this nut to 67 foot-pounds. So after we torque the nut, we realized that the castle nut, or the notch in the nut, doesn't line up with the hole in the ball joint or tie rod end stud here to fit our cotter pin. So we're just going to put our wrench on there, and we're just going to tighten it just a hair bit more, just to see if we can get that to line up. It's not lining up quite yet, so we're just going to go ahead and tighten that just a little bit more. Now we're going to go ahead and feed our cotter pin through. Go ahead and bend over the tab on the top here. Cut off the excess. Let's go ahead and tighten up our jam nut here. Once we tighten up the jam nut, go ahead and grab your pliers and just straighten out that tie rod end. On the inside, I want to go ahead and just use a zip tie. I'm going to snug that down. And we'll cut off our excess. And go ahead and install your wheel. Get the lug nut started by hand. Let's go ahead and snug all these lug nuts down. Let's go ahead and torque the lug nuts to 85 foot-pounds. Locate the notch right here on the hubcap. You want to line that up with a valve stem on the wheel. Working your way around a perimeter, lock this onto the wheel.